The great station of Zera Prime floated in neutral space like a monument to galactic civilization, and inside its vast council chamber, representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered to witness something they considered amusing: humanity's petition for full membership. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the circular chamber while holographic displays showed Earth's blue oceans and green continents to the assembled delegates. And she could feel their condescension even across the distance that separated her podium from their elevated seats, which ringed the chamber in ascending tiers that made her feel like an animal in an arena. The Kovani delegate spoke first, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls, and his voice carried the tone of someone addressing a child. "Humanity wishes to join our ancient compact," he said while gesturing with appendages that looked like living glass. "Yet you come from a world soaked in the blood of your own kind. Your historical records show centuries of total war, genocide, and weapons designed solely to inflict maximum suffering upon your own species." Elena kept her expression neutral, even though her hands wanted to clench into fists. And she had prepared for this dismissal during the long journey from Earth. "Honored delegates," she began while her voice carried through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "We come before you not to hide our history, but to explain it. Earth is a death world by your standards, a planet where everything evolved to survive by fighting, killing, and adapting to threats that would destroy most species. The Salenta representative, the being of flowing mercury-like substance contained in a force field rippled with what might have been laughter. So you admit your species is violent and primitive?" The Salenta asked. "We admit our species learned hard lessons," Elena replied while pulling up holographic images of Earth's bloodiest conflicts. "We fought 2 world wars that killed millions. We developed nuclear weapons and brought ourselves to the edge of extinction. We created biological and chemical weapons that could end all life on our planet. And then, and this is crucial, we chose to step back from the brink." She advanced the display to show the treaties. The weapons dismantled, the international organizations built to prevent future catastrophes. "We learned that total war is sometimes necessary for survival," Elena continued. "But we also learned to control it, channel it, and use it only when absolutely required. This is why we come before you today with a request that may seem unusual." The chamber fell silent as delegates leaned forward in their seats or extended sensory organs toward her. "We request recognition of what we call the reserved right of extreme response," Elena said while the words appeared in 1,000 languages on displays throughout the chamber. "We understand your doctrine of proportional response. We respect the wisdom of limiting conflicts to economic pressure and ritualized combat. But we ask that you recognize humanity's right to respond without limitation to existential threats." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming laughter echoed through the chamber in forms ranging from harmonic tones to clicking sounds to emissions of various gases that the translation systems rendered as mirth. The Kovani delegate's body flashed with bright colors. "You ask us to exempt you from 10,000 years of civilized conduct?" he said while his tone dripped with contempt. "You want permission to unleash your barbaric total war upon the galaxy whenever you feel threatened? We ask you to understand that humanity will not allow itself to be destroyed while following rules our enemies ignore," Elena countered, and her voice grew harder. "We have seen what happens when civilized people refuse to fight with necessary force against those who would annihilate them. We carry the scars of those lessons in our genetic memory," the elder counselor, being so ancient its species name had been forgotten, spoke for the first time in its whispering voice that somehow filled the entire chamber. "Your fear is understandable for a young species," the elder said. "But the galaxy has evolved beyond such paranoia. In 30,000 years of council history, no species has faced true extinction at the hands of another. Our doctrine ensures conflicts remain limited and survivable for all parties. Elena took a breath and made her final argument. With respect, Elder, your species evolved in a garden galaxy where resources were abundant and worlds were plentiful, she said. Humanity evolved on a single world where every resource was contested, where winter meant starvation, where disease could wipe out entire populations, and where the only rule was survive or die. We cannot simply forget millions of years of evolution because you have created a peaceful era. She stepped forward, and her image was projected large across every display. We come before you in good faith. We offer our technology, our cultural richness, and our commitment to peaceful coexistence, Elena said, while her words rang through the chamber. But we also come with a warning. Do not mistake our willingness to join your system as weakness. Do not assume our respect for your doctrine means we will allow our species to be destroyed while following your rules. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. If you threaten our existence, we will not abide by limitations designed for species that have never faced annihilation, Elena continued. We will respond with every weapon, every strategy, and every ounce of fury that our evolution has burned into our very DNA. We have warned you once. This warning will not be repeated. The Kovani delegates' colors shifted to dark purples and reds. This council does not respond well to threats from applicant species, he said coldly. It is not a threat, Elena replied. It is a statement of fact. We seek membership because we want to be part of something larger than ourselves. But we will not surrender our fundamental right to survive. The vote came quickly. Humanity was granted limited membership with strict monitoring, and their request for the reserved right of extreme response was denied by unanimous vote. As Elena left the chamber, she accessed the official record and confirmed that her warning had been recorded in the Council's permanent archives. And that was all she had really needed: proof that humanity had tried to explain, tried to warn them, tried to make them understand. She sent a coded message back to Earth. They laughed at us. Proceed with contingency plans across the galaxy. The other species returned to their comfortable lives and shared jokes about the paranoid humans who thought their primitive war-making ways were somehow special. And in 1,000 bars and gathering places, the story of humanity's ridiculous request became a source of entertainment. None of them noticed the human colony ships moving toward the galactic rim, or the asteroid mining operations that seemed far too extensive for simple resource extraction, or the research stations that humanity built in isolated systems far from curious eyes. The Galactic Council had been warned, and they had laughed. And humanity, having learned its lessons in blood across 10,000 years of history, quietly began preparing for the day when the laughter would stop. 15 years had passed since Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Council, and humanity had proven itself to be model citizens of the galaxy, trading fairly, sharing medical advances, and carefully following every rule the Council had established. 12 human colony worlds now dotted the galactic rim in systems the older species considered too remote or resource poor to bother with, and 8 million humans called New Harmony, home a world of rolling grasslands and clear rivers where families had built something beautiful far from Earth's crowded cities. The VEC Collective had been harassing human shipping lanes for 2 years, and humanity responded exactly as the doctrine of proportional response required: filing complaints with the Council, organizing defensive patrols, and limiting their military responses to targeted strikes against pirate vessels. Commander Sarah Chun reviewed the latest raid reports aboard the human patrol cruiser, determination while frustration burned in her chest. Another convoy hit, her tactical officer reported. The VEC took the cargo and destroyed the ships instead of just disabling them. 3 merchant vessels lost with all hands. Sarah wanted to unleash the Determination's full weapons capacity on the next VEC ship they encountered. But orders from Earth were clear. Follow the doctrine. Trust the Council. Show the galaxy that humanity could be civilized. Log it and forward to the Council, she said while keeping her voice level. What Sarah and the other human commanders did not know was that the Vec raids were about to escalate into something far worse. War Master Thrank of the Vec Collective stood aboard his flagship and studied holographic displays of human territory, while his multiple eyes gleamed with ambition. The Vec were reptilian predators who had built their civilization on conquest. But the Council's doctrine had limited them to economic raiding and occasional skirmishes for the past 3 centuries, and Frank was tired of such restrictions. The humans respond with weakness every time we strike them, he said to his officers, while his forked tongue tasted the air. They file complaints and follow rules while their people die. They are prey animals pretending to be predators. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Kresh, hissed agreement. The Council will not intervene, Kresh said. They find the situation amusing. I have seen their communications. They place bets on how long humanity will tolerate our raids before breaking. Thrank's decision was made in that moment. He would claim human territory for the Vec Collective, and the Council would do nothing to stop him. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We take New Harmony. The invasion began without warning on a morning when New Harmony's 8 million colonists were beginning their daily routines, farmers heading to fields, children going to schools, and workers starting their shifts in the small manufacturing centers that had been built with such hope. Vec warships dropped out of FTL in perfect attack formation while their weapons batteries opened fire on the orbital defense platforms that humanity had built to protect the colony. The human defense fleet responded within minutes, and Captain Marcus Webb commanded 5 patrol cruisers against 20 Vec warships while knowing the odds were impossible. All ships, defensive pattern Delta, he ordered while the Determination and her sister ships moved to intercept. Protect the evacuation transports. We need to get civilians off the planet. The battle was brutal, and one-sided human ships fought with skill and courage. But they were outnumbered and outgunned, and worse. They were following the doctrine while the Vec were not. Marcus watched in horror as Vec ships ignored military targets and fired on civilian population centers. They are targeting cities. His tactical officer shouted, "Return fire on military vessels only." Marcus ordered even though every instinct screamed at him to unleash hell on the Vec fleet. We follow the doctrine. Earth Command has been notified and the Council will intervene. But the Council did not intervene. They debated and discussed and formed committees while New Harmony burned. 3 weeks into the invasion, the Vec controlled New Harmony's orbit and had landed ground forces across the planet. And what happened next would change the galaxy forever. Thrank ordered his soldiers to begin systematic executions of colonists, not as military necessity, but as entertainment and warning. And the Vec broadcast the executions across their communication networks while laughing at human weakness. Commander Chen watched the feeds from her position aboard the Determination, now part of a blockade line trying to prevent more Vec ships from reinforcing the invasion, and she saw farmers shot in their fields, teachers killed in front of their students, and families torn apart while Vec soldiers posed for recordings. Earth Command is ordering us to maintain position, her communications officer said quietly. The Council has promised to send mediators. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the doctrine. About civilization, about the careful path humanity had walked for 15 years. Then the Vec made their final mistake. War Master Thrank had grown bored with conventional conquest, and he wanted to send a message that would terrify the other human colonies into surrender. Deploy the biological weapon, he ordered, while his officers hesitated. I want the capital city to understand the price of resistance. The weapon was loaded onto atmospheric missiles and launched toward New Harmony's largest city, home to 1.3 million people, and it was designed not for quick death, but for maximum suffering. The pathogen spread through the population within hours, while people began experiencing symptoms that started with fever and ended with their internal organs liquefying over the course of days. Hospitals overflowed with victims while doctors worked desperately to find treatments. But the VEC weapon was designed to resist all known medical interventions across human space. The broadcast from New Harmony showed the nightmare children dying in agony, parents helpless to save them, and entire city blocks turning into mass graves. Elena Vasquez, now 67 years old and serving as Earth's senior diplomat, called for an emergency council session. She stood before the same chamber where she had warned them 15 years ago, and her voice shook with barely controlled rage. The VEC have deployed biological weapons against civilian populations, she said, while holographic displays showed the horror. 1.3 million dead and dying. This is genocide, and we demand immediate council intervention. The Cavani delegate shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The situation is complex, he began. The VEC claimed the weapon was deployed by rogue elements. They are broadcasting the executions for entertainment. Elena shouted, "They are killing our people while you debate semantics." The elder counselor's whispering voice filled the chamber. Humanity must show restraint. Violence begets violence, and we cannot allow. Elena cut the transmission. She returned to Earth and walked directly into the office of President Maria Santos. "They will not help us," Elena said flatly. President Santos nodded slowly while her face showed no surprise. "Then we proceed with the plan," she said. Elena felt the weight of what was about to happen. "We warned them once," she said quietly. "Yes," the president agreed. "We did." The order went out across all human space on secured channels that the council could not intercept. Withdraw all diplomatic staff. Recall all trade missions. Activate all defense protocols. And begin Operation Righteous Fury. Every human representative left council space within 48 hours while transport ships carried them home. A total communications blackout descended over human territory. No transmissions in or out. No trade ships, no diplomatic contact. The galaxy watched with curiosity and some amusement while analysts predicted that humanity was collapsing into internal chaos or economic failure. The VEC celebrated their conquest of New Harmony and began moving their fleet toward humanity's second colony world, while War Master Threnk declared himself ruler of what he called the new VEC Empire. None of them knew what was building in the darkness of human space, in asteroid shipyards and hidden research stations, in orbital factories and underground bunkers. Humanity had spent 15 years preparing for this day, while hoping it would never come. And now the preparations were complete. The galaxy would learn what humans had tried to warn them about, and the lesson would be written in fire and blood across the stars. 6 months of silence had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic society. And in that time, the Council's analysts published dozens of reports predicting economic collapse, political fragmentation, and the eventual dissolution of human unity. War Master Threnk stood on the bridge of his flagship while preparing to invade New Beijing, humanity's second colony world, and he felt nothing but contempt for the species that had run away. Instead of fighting, the humans hide in their space like frightened children, he said to his officers while his fleet of 300 warships prepared to jump. When we finish conquering their colonies, we will move on Earth itself and claim the homeworld as our prize. Crash monitored the sensors while running final checks on weapon systems. War Master, we are detecting unusual gravitational distortions near the edge of the VEC home system, he reported. Threnk dismissed it with a wave of his clawed hand. Probably a stellar anomaly. Focus on the invasion fleet. What the VEC sensors were detecting was not an anomaly. It was the leading edge of humanity's answer to 15 years of restraint and 3 months of genocide. The human fleet emerged from FTL space in perfect formation above the VEC homeworld. And it was not a fleet in any conventional sense. It was an armada of extinction. 1,000 warships materialized in the VEC home system, while their hulls bore no markings. No flags, no identification beyond the simple designation painted in white. Terra. These were not the patrol cruisers the galaxy had seen escorting human trade convoys. These were dreadnoughts built in secret asteroid shipyards over 15 years, while humanity smiled and followed the Council's rules. Each ship was 3 times larger than the biggest VEC warship, and their weapons had been designed by a species that remembered nuclear war, biological weapons, and the countless ways humans had invented to kill each other efficiently. Admiral Victoria Chun commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Ragnarok, humanity's first super dreadnought, while her tactical displays showed every military target in the VEC home system. "All ships weapons-free," she said, while her voice carried across secure channels to every human vessel. No communication, no negotiation, no mercy. The attack began without warning, because warnings had already been given 15 years ago. Kinetic kill vehicles launched from the human ships, solid slugs of tungsten and titanium, accelerated to 90% of light speed by magnetic rails that ran the length of each dreadnought. The projectiles crossed the distance to VEC orbital stations in seconds, while moving too fast for shields or point defense systems to intercept. When 1,000 tons of metal impacts a target at relativistic speeds, the energy release exceeds most nuclear weapons, and the VIG stations simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but atomized into expanding clouds of plasma. The VEC defense fleet scrambled to respond, while 3,000 warships of various sizes tried to form battle lines. "Target their fleet," Admiral Chun ordered. Antimatter warheads, pattern alpha, human ships, unleashed weapons that had been banned by Galactic law for 10,000 years, missiles carrying antimatter, warheads that could crack planetary shields and vaporize warships with single hits. The VEC fleet commander screened orders while his ships returned fire, but human point defense systems intercepted 90% of incoming fire. And the ships that did take hits had armor designed to withstand punishment that would destroy 3 conventional vessels. Within the first hour, half the VEC fleet was destroyed. War Master Thrank watched from his position near New Beijing while his communication systems brought him real-time feeds of his homeworld's destruction. "This is impossible," he hissed while his multiple eyes widened in horror. "They are using weapons that should not exist. The Council banned such things millennia ago." His second-in-command had no answer while the feeds showed VEC warships exploding in brilliant flashes of light. "Recall all forces to defend the homeworld," Frank ordered, but he knew it was already too late. The human fleet did not limit itself to military targets. They began systematically destroying every piece of infrastructure the VEC had built over 3 centuries of spacefaring civilization. Orbital factories vanished in antimatter fire, while shipyards were reduced to fragments. Communication satellites were shredded by swarms of autonomous drones, and defensive platforms were overwhelmed by weapons that struck from impossible angles. But the most terrifying aspect of the human attack was what came next. Billions of small objects detached from the human ships and descended on the VEC homeworld like metallic rain. These were autonomous hunter-killer drones designed with one purpose: destroy every military installation on the planet's surface. The drones were smart, terrifyingly smart, and they used artificial intelligence that made decisions faster than any biological mind could process. They identified military bases, weapons depots, command centers, and troop concentrations with perfect accuracy. And then they struck with precise force that left civilian structures untouched. A VEC military academy exploded in flames, while the civilian hospital next door remained undamaged. Ammunition factories burned, while worker housing stood intact. Command bunkers were penetrated by shaped charges, while nearby towns saw no violence. The Vec military tried to fight back, but the drones adapted to every tactic. They learned from each engagement and shared information instantaneously across the entire swarm. Ground-based anti-air systems managed to destroy thousands of drones, but millions more kept coming. Admiral Chun watched the tactical displays while her expression remained cold and professional. "Status report," she requested. "Vec orbital infrastructure 97% destroyed," her tactical officer reported. "Surface military targets 84% eliminated. Vec fleet reduced to scattered remnants fleeing the system. Time to completion?" Chun asked. 18 hours to complete military neutralization." Chun nodded while calculating the message this attack would send to the galaxy. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. "I want their industrial capacity reduced to pre-space flight levels. They will rebuild, but it will take them centuries. And they will remember this lesson every day of those centuries." The human fleet spread out across the Vec home system, while additional waves of drones targeted every factory, refinery, power generation facility, and technology center that could support military production. The Vec population watched in terror from their cities, while the sky burned with falling metal, and their entire civilization was dismantled piece by piece. But the humans did not bomb cities or target civilians. They were surgically removing the Vec collective's ability to wage war while leaving the population alive to face the consequences of their leaders' decisions. 72 hours after the attack began, it was over. The Vec home system fell silent, except for the desperate transmissions of civilians calling for help that would not come. Admiral Chun broadcast a single message on all frequencies. Message meant not just for the Vec, but for every species in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Victoria Chun of the Terran Federation," she said, while her image was transmitted across every communication network. The Vec Collective deployed biological weapons against civilian populations. They committed genocide against 1.3 million human beings. They violated every law of civilized conduct, while the Galactic Council watched and did nothing. She paused while letting her words sink in. "We warned the Council 15 years ago that humanity would not tolerate existential threats," Chung continued. "We begged for recognition of our fundamental right to survive. They laughed at us, and when genocide came, they debated while our people died." Behind her, the tactical displays showed the complete devastation of Vec military power. "The Vec military no longer exists," she said flatly. "Their weapons are destroyed, their fleets are scattered debris, and their industrial base has been reduced to levels that will take centuries to rebuild. The civilian population has been spared because humanity does not wage war on the helpless." Her expression hardened. "But understand this, we warned you once," Chun said, while her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "That warning stands for all time. Threaten human existence, and we will respond with every weapon, every strategy, and every ounce of fury that our evolution has given us." The transmission ended while Admiral Chun turned to her fleet. "Set course for Threshold System," she ordered. "The Council will respond, and we need to be ready." The human fleet departed the Vec home system while leaving behind a broken civilization and a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity had tried peace, had tried diplomacy, had tried following the rules. Now the galaxy would learn what humans had known for thousands of years, that some lessons can only be taught in blood. The news of what happened to the Vec spread across the galaxy in hours, while every species, with faster-than-light communication, received the recordings of orbital stations, atomized by relativistic projectiles and fleets, reduced to expanding debris clouds. The Kovani delegate stood before an emergency council session while his crystalline body pulsed with colors that indicated extreme agitation. "Humanity has revealed itself to be the threat we should have recognized," he declared while his voice resonated through the chamber. They possess weapons that violate every treaty, every accord, and every principle of civilized warfare. They must be stopped before they turn their fury on other species. The Solenter representative flowed across its platform while emitting frequencies that the translators rendered as urgent agreement. The humans claimed they wanted peace, but they have shown their true nature, the Solenter said. They are apex predators pretending to be civilized. We must act now while they are still few in number. The Elder Counselor had watched humanity's broadcast 17 times while analyzing every word. Admiral Chun had spoken. They warned us, the Elder said quietly. 15 years ago, Ambassador Vasquez stood in this very chamber and warned us explicitly about humanity's capacity for total war, a warning we wisely rejected. The Corvani delegate snapped. We cannot allow every savage species to claim special exemption from civilized conduct. The vote came swiftly. 17 species pledged warships to what they called the Galactic Protection Fleet, while the stated goal was to enforce sanctions on human space and bring humanity's leaders to trial for war crimes. It was the largest combined fleet in Council history, 40,000 warships, representing the military might of civilizations that had mastered space travel when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. Fleet Commander Zarkith of the Corvani took overall command while he studied tactical reports and felt confident that overwhelming numbers would force humanity to surrender. They have perhaps 2,000 ships at most, he told his staff while holographic displays showed the coalition fleet assembling. We will meet them at Threshold System and demand their unconditional surrender. If they refuse, we will demonstrate that galactic unity cannot be defeated by one aggressive species. What Zarkith did not know was that human intelligence had been monitoring Council communications since the moment humanity withdrew from galactic society. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok while reviewing the latest intelligence reports. 40,000 ships, her second-in-command said quietly. The Council is bringing everything they have. They are bringing everything they are willing to risk, Chen corrected. These are their peacekeeping forces and reserve fleets, not their total military capacity. They still think this is a police action, not a real war. She pulled up tactical projections of the Threshold System, a strategic location with multiple gravity wells and asteroid fields that could be used for both offense and defense. We will meet them there, Chun decided, and we will show them why humanity prepared for this day. The human fleet arrived at Threshold first, while 1,000 dreadnoughts took positions among the asteroids and deployed weapons platforms that had been pre-positioned over the past 6 months. The Council fleet emerged from FDL in a massive formation meant to intimidate, while 40,000 ships filled the sensor screens like a swarm of angry insects. Commander Zarkith opened a communication channel while his image appeared on every human ship. "Attention human forces," he said in a voice meant to sound authoritative. "You are ordered to stand down immediately and surrender your vessels. Your leaders will be transported to Jera Prime to stand trial for crimes against galactic peace." Admiral Chun activated her own communication, while her response was broadcast not just to the Council fleet, but across every known communication network in the galaxy. "Commander Zarkith," she began, "I want you to understand something before we begin. Every human ship in this fleet is crewed by volunteers who know they might not survive this battle. We are not here because we want to fight the galaxy. We are here because you forced us to choose between submission and survival." She pulled up holographic displays showing footage from New Harmony, the executions, the biological weapons, the suffering. "For 3 months we begged the Council to intervene while the Vate committed genocide," Chun continued. "We filed reports, we presented evidence. We followed every proper channel. The council debated and delayed while 1.3 million of our people died in agony. Her expression hardened. We presented evidence that 17 council species supplied weapons and intelligence to the VEC, she said, while highlighting the data. You turned our suffering into entertainment while placing bets on how long we would tolerate being murdered. You weaponized your own doctrine against us to see if we would accept genocide with restraint. Zarkith's crystalline form shifted to dark colors. The council's internal affairs are not. You set the rules, and then you ignored them when it suited your purposes. Chun interrupted. The VEC were your proxy, testing whether humanity would die politely. Now you face the consequences of that decision. She leaned forward while her voice dropped to deadly calm. We warned you once, 15 years ago, Chun said. We told you explicitly that humanity cannot and will not accept existential threats while following rules designed for species that have never faced extinction. You laughed at us. The tactical displays behind her showed the full extent of human preparations. Not just 1,000 ships present, but glimpses of the shipyards, the weapons research facilities, and the industrial capacity humanity had built in secret. This is humanity's final offer, Chun declared. Recognize our right to total war when faced with genocide. Amend the doctrine to include what we call the human exception. Allow us to exist as equal members of galactic society with our fundamental survival rights intact. Or, Zarkith demanded, or we teach you the lesson the VEC just learned, Chun replied. We would prefer peace, Commander, but we will fight for our survival with every weapon and every tactic our evolution has given us. The choice is yours. The Council fleet's answer came in the form of weapons fire. 40,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, while energy beams and missiles filled the space between the two fleets. The Battle of Threshold had begun. Human point defense systems came alive while intercepting thousands of incoming projectiles. And the Dreadnought's advanced shields absorbed hits that would have vaporized conventional warships. Return fire, Admiral Chun ordered. Target their command ships first. We want to disrupt their coordination. The human fleet responded with terrifying efficiency, while relativistic kill vehicles tore through Council formations. Antimatter warheads cracked shields, and swarms of autonomous drones began their deadly work. But the Council had numbers on their side. And for every human ship, there were 40 Council vessels. The battle quickly devolved into a chaotic melee, while ships on both sides exploded in brilliant flashes and debris fields expanded through the combat zone. Human ships fought with coordinated brutality that shocked the Council forces when vessels took critical damage. Their crews did not abandon ship. Instead, they set reactors to overload and rammed enemy formations while taking 3 or 4 Council ships with them in the explosion. Zarkith watched in horror as his tactical display showed human ships turning themselves into suicide weapons. They are insane, he shouted. No civilized species would sacrifice themselves like this. But what Zarkith did not understand was that every human crew had volunteered knowing the risks. And they had decided that their deaths would serve a purpose. They would show the galaxy that humanity would never surrender, never submit, and never allow itself to be destroyed. The autonomous weapons proved even more devastating than in the VEC system. The drones had been updated with combat data from that battle, and they now moved with terrifying intelligence. They targeted not just warships but supply vessels, communication relays, and command stations while severing the complex coordination that the Council fleet required 3 days into the battle. The casualties were staggering. Humanity had lost 300 ships and 90,000 crew members. But the Council fleet had lost 23,000 vessels and millions of casualties. The survivors began to retreat while their formation broke apart and ships fled in panic. Zarkith's flagship was surrounded by human dreadnoughts when Admiral Chen's face appeared on his communication screen. Stand down, Commander, she said, while her voice carried no triumph. Only exhaustion. You have lost. Continuing this battle serves no purpose but adding to the death toll. Zarkith looked at his tactical displays and saw the truth. His fleet was shattered beyond repair, while human reinforcements were already arriving from deeper in human space. You would let us retreat? He asked while his voice carried disbelief. We are not monsters, Chun replied. We fight to survive, not to conquer. Take your survivors home and tell the Council that humanity's warning still stands. We will defend ourselves without mercy. But we prefer to live in peace. The Council fleet retreated while leaving behind debris and the knowledge that they had severely underestimated the species they had dismissed as primitive. The aftermath of the Battle of Threshold sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that went far beyond military defeat. And for the first time in 30,000 years, the Council faced a species they could not intimidate, could not defeat, and could not ignore. The Kovani delegate stood before what remained of the Council, while his crystalline body had lost its usual brilliant colors and now appeared dull and gray. We have suffered the greatest military defeat in recorded history, he said quietly. 23,000 ships destroyed, millions dead, and our combined fleet scattered. The humans have proven they possess both the capability and the will to fight total war. The elder counselor spoke with a voice that sounded older and more tired than ever. We were warned, the elder said. Ambassador Vasquez told us explicitly what would happen if we threatened humanity's existence. We chose not to listen because we believed our civilization had evolved beyond such primitive concerns. The Salenta representative flowed across its platform while emitting frequencies that carried profound distress. What do we do now? It asked. We cannot defeat them militarily, but we cannot allow one species to exist outside the rules that govern all others. Admiral Chun had returned to Earth for the first time in 6 months while receiving a hero's welcome from billions of humans who knew she had secured their survival. But she felt no joy in the victory, only exhaustion and the knowledge that the work was far from finished. President Santos met her in the same office where the orders for Operation Righteous Fury had been issued. The Council has requested negotiations, the President said. They want to discuss terms for humanity's return to galactic society. What are our demands? Chun asked. Santos pulled up a holographic document that legal experts had been crafting for weeks. Recognition of the human exception to the doctrine, she said. Explicit acknowledgement that humanity retains the right to respond to existential threats without limitation. A permanent seat on the Council with veto power over any action that could threaten human interests. And reparations for the genocide in New Harmony. Chun studied the terms while knowing that each one would be bitterly contested. They will never agree to all of this, she said. Then we remain in isolation, Santos replied. We have proven we can survive without them. We have 12 colonies, growing industrial capacity, and the will to defend ourselves. If they want humanity as part of the galactic community, they will accept our terms. The negotiations took place on neutral ground, a space station that had been hastily constructed at a location equidistant from Earth and Jera Prime. Elena Vasquez led the human delegation, even though she was now 82 years old and walked with a cane. And her presence carried symbolic weight because she had been the one to warn the Council decades earlier. Across the negotiating table sat representatives from every major Council species, while their expressions ranged from resentment to fear to cautious respect. Humanity has demonstrated its military might, the Kovani delegate began. But might does not make right. We cannot simply abandon 10,000 years of civilized conduct because one species threatens violence. Elena leaned forward while her voice remained steady despite her age. You abandoned your principles when you allowed the Vec to commit genocide while you watched and did nothing. she said. You weaponized your doctrine against us to test our limits. You turned our suffering into entertainment while our people died. She pulled up holographic evidence communications between council species discussing the human situation with detached amusement, betting pools on human responses, and intelligence reports that proved council members had supplied the VEC with targeting data for human colonies. We are not asking you to abandon civilization, Elena continued. We are asking you to recognize that your doctrine was designed by species that have never faced extinction, for conflicts between powers that share common assumptions about acceptable costs. The elder counselors studied the human delegation with ancient eyes. What you ask for is dangerous, the elder said. If we grant humanity exemption from the doctrine, other species will demand the same. The entire system that has maintained peace for millennia will collapse. Then build a better system, Elena replied. Create a framework that recognizes different species have different survival requirements. Establish clear definitions of what constitutes existential threat. Put safeguards in place to prevent abuse. But do not ask humanity to commit suicide by following rules while our enemies ignore them. The negotiations continued for 3 months while both sides refused to yield on critical points. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the VEC themselves. The new VEC, leader a civilian named Strin, who had taken power after Warmaster Thrank's death in the battle, sent a message that was broadcast across the galaxy. The VEC Collective committed terrible crimes against humanity, Stren said while standing amid the ruins of VEC military infrastructure. We deployed biological weapons against civilians. We committed genocide. We earned the destruction that followed. His multiple eyes looked directly into the recording device. Humanity could have exterminated my species, he continued. Their weapons could have burned our world and killed every VEC in existence. Instead, they surgically removed our military capacity while sparing our civilians. They fought with precision and restraint even in their fury. He gestured to the VEC cities behind him where life continued despite the devastation. I am asking the Council to grant humanity's request, Stren declared. Not because I fear them, but because they have earned the right to define their own survival. The VEC will spend centuries rebuilding, and every day we will remember the lesson they taught us, that mercy is not weakness, but that attacking those who offer mercy is suicide. The message shifted the entire tone of the negotiations while even the most resistant council members found it difficult to argue against the testimony of humanity's victims. 2 weeks later, the Treaty of Threshold was signed. Humanity received recognition of what became known as the human exception, the formal acknowledgement that when faced with genocide or existential threat, humanity retained the right to respond without limitation. The doctrine of proportional response was amended to include provisions for extreme circumstances while establishing strict definitions and oversight. To prevent abuse, humanity received a permanent seat on the Council with veto power over any military action that could affect human interests. But the most important change was structural. The Council itself was reformed to include representation from younger species and to acknowledge that different evolutionary backgrounds might require different approaches to conflict. Elena Vasquez stood before the Reform Council on the day humanity officially rejoined galactic society. She was 97 years old, and this would be her final public appearance before retirement. 32 years ago, I stood in this chamber and warned you that humanity could not follow your doctrine if faced with extinction, she said while her voice carried the weight of those decades. You laughed at us then. You learned the truth in blood and fire. She paused while looking at the assembled delegates. My people will rejoin galactic society now, Elena continued. We will trade, explore, and build alongside you. We will share our knowledge, our culture, and our dreams. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves, Her expression hardened with the same determination she had shown 3 decades earlier. "But understand this, we warned you once, and that warning stands eternal," she said. "We fight without mercy, not because we are cool, but because we learned long ago on our violent world that mercy toward those who would annihilate you is suicide." She looked directly at each delegate while making sure they understood. "We hope we never have to prove this again," Elena said quietly. "We hope the galaxy has learned that humanity will be a peaceful neighbor, a loyal ally, and a generous friend, but we will be an absolutely terrifying enemy to anyone who threatens our existence." The chamber fell silent while the weight of her words settled over the assembly. "We have earned the right to exist on our own terms," Elena concluded. "We have paid for that right with blood and sacrifice. We ask only that you respect it, and in return, we will help build a galaxy where all species can thrive without fear." The vote to accept humanity's full membership passed unanimously. 10 years later, Elena Vasquez passed away peacefully in her sleep while surrounded by family. Her funeral was attended by representatives from 200 species, including the Corvani delegate who had laughed at her warning decades earlier. He stood before her memorial and placed a crystal flower, a Corvani symbol of respect, at its base. "You were right," he said quietly. "And we should have listened." Humanity's integration into galactic society proceeded slowly but steadily while human colonies spread across space and human scientists contributed to joint research projects. The weapons that had won the war were quietly maintained but never used again. And the shipyards that had built the dreadnoughts were converted to commercial vessel production. But every human child learned the history of New Harmony, the warning Elena Vasquez had delivered, and the price humanity had paid to secure the right to survive.